Today on Podcast Perspectives, we are joined by Justin McGoldrick. How long does it actually take for a podcast to become a TV show or film?
I actually keep a note card next to my desk that says, do you want to spend the next 5 years on this? Because that's what it usually takes.
Justin's career spans some of the biggest names in entertainment, from the mailroom at William Morris Endeavor to executive roles at MGM, Sony Pictures, and Illumination Entertainment. In 2018, he became the head of TV and film development at Gimlet Media. After nearly 5 years at Spotify, following the Gimlet acquisition, Justin launched Sound Picture in 2024, partnering with studios including Hyperobject Industries, LA Studios, Kaleidoscope, and Project Brazen to bring audio stories to life on screen. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Thanks, Jeff.
So, turning a podcast into a television or film vehicle seems very out of reach to so many people. So I want to bring your role down to earth a little bit and ask you to begin by explaining just what you do every day. Like, what does a successful project look like?
A successful project will go through a lot of different phases, but in terms of breaking down my day, it's often listening to a lot of podcasts, reading a lot of scripts as samples to see who might be the right creative fit to adapt the podcast I'm listening to. Meeting with writers, directors, actors whose work I admire, who I feel inspired by, and who I could potentially package with the material I'm listening to. And just staying in touch with agents, managers, executives, getting a sense of where the marketplace is, what buyers are looking for. And by buyers, I mean, film studios, TV studios, networks. And then, in success, once a project actually gets sold, I will be across the project from start to finish. So working alongside the rights holders and the writer, director, other creative elements, being, a steward of the project. It's not my vision, but I'm working every day to ensure that someone else's vision gets realized. And, that involves translating studio and executive notes. It may mean solving really idiosyncratic dilemmas that you might never be able to read about in a textbook, but that just sort of come up when you have a lot of really passionate creative people coming together and, working a project, pushing it through the development pipeline, going through several rounds of scripts, of notes, attaching the creative elements that actually get a project greenlit into production. And then from there, I'm on set, alongside the other creative collaborators, and then also seeing a project through post and marketing and really, from grain to glass, seeing a project through from start to finish.
When you're on set, are you providing notes or are you just watching? Or does it depend on the project?
It really depends on the project. I will often be there as a support system. My notes are not necessarily going to be my personal feelings about it, but rather ensuring that we're actually following through on the vision that everyone committed to, that, if the financiers see the material, they're going to be happy with it. But also just being there, as strategic, emotional, and creative support for other people who are really tasked with seeing the vision through.
How did those early experiences at the studios, especially at places like Sony and Illumination, prepare you for what you'd eventually do in podcasting?
So I worked at Ivan Reitman's production company, which was a pod on the Sony lot. It was called Ghost Core, and they were relaunching the Ghostbusters franchise. They also ran a company called the Montecito Picture Company that I was a junior executive at, and they were relaunching Baywatch and had a whole array of
Is that like the rock version of it?
Yeah, exactly. At that time, we had just come out of a run of really, superb studio comedies. And at that time, I loved going to comedy shows. I loved the fact that I could scout new talent online, that I could go to comedy shows and find stand-ups who might have original ideas that I could develop. And then I was embedded at a company run by someone who's sort of a forefather of comedy in the last, 40 years. And I saw in real time the marketplace conditions move so swiftly towards the need for proven, established IP, that even for, a company like Montecito / Ghost Core, the things that they were really getting made were the things that were based on, global IP. And that sort of shift led me to jumping to Illumination, which at the time they were developing, I was working on sequels to Minions and Secret Life of Pets and Sing, but also, Shrek 5 and Super Mario Brothers, and really some of the biggest, billion-dollar IP in the world. And I got to see how deliberate and intentional they were about managing that IP, and that, that was not alchemy. That was a very, very thoughtful approach to how to find stories that have global resonance, that lean into comedy as a way to reach audiences across languages, and to celebrate really rich, beautiful worlds that deliver on the promise of a cinematic experience. But I also was finding that the things that I personally cared about were podcasts, were these sort of minor key character driven stories, again, in really specific worlds, but that had, more of that kind of squid and the whale touch to them. This was around 2018, and Gimlet was just about to release the adaptation of Homecoming on Amazon. And I got a call, asking if I'd be interested to meet with them, because they were looking to build an in-house utility at Gimlet, where rather than, having to always align with another producer outside of the company, they as rights holders could be both the rights holders and the producers, creative, strategic, sort of directional producers of getting projects off the ground. And so, yeah, it was this sort of perfect marriage of right time and right interest. And just, I was very, I had been a real evangelist for the podcast industry. Like I mentioned, I always listened to audiobooks, and I found myself in every meeting I was in, always coming back to the latest thing I was listening to. And so I wanted to follow that and go to a company that at the time was really kind of at the leading cutting edge of what was happening. But it was this perfect marriage of something that I loved, which was podcasting, and then something that I knew, which was film and TV.
So that was 2018. You moved to Gimlet. They kind of had like a little sub company underneath the Gimlet umbrella called Gimlet Pictures. And they were focused on podcast to screen adaptations, which at that point in time were still pretty rare. And you were employee number 2 of that division. So what did it look like to build a TV and film development arm from scratch within the inside of a bigger institution? And this was pre Spotify.
This was pre Spotify by about 6 months. It was a dream come true. Like, couldn't have asked for a better experience. I was working with Chris Giliberti, who founded Gimlet Pictures. He was an very early employee at Gimlet, and is absolutely the visionary for how, they were able to convert. It was a great time to be at a podcast company, great time to be selling TV and film. And so we had a great run. I mean, I think, for a year and a half, every project we pitched, we sold. And this was scripted projects, unscripted projects, features, TV, animation, live action. Really, it felt like overnight we built a slate of things we could be really proud of. And, a lot of that came from the team at Gimlet that was producing fiction shows run by Mimi O'Donnell. And then a lot of it was, coming from Reply All, or some of the formats on the unscripted side, like Heavyweight or Science Versus, that you could envision what, maybe a TV version of that looked like.
I want to talk about a couple like specific projects, but more broadly, a lot of these like have seen the light of day. Some of them have not. Using Heavyweight as an example, is there still a world where that could be adapted? And if so, what does that look like now that it's with Pushkin?
Yeah, I can't speak specifically to the right situation for Heavyweight, but certainly for, like, generally speaking, if a project were to get pitched and sold, usually the deals run for 12 months or 18 months. And often there will be an optional additional 12 months or 18 months that the financier can trigger. And so a podcast can be, any rights deal will typically take a project, make it exclusive to a particular party for 12 months or 18 months or 24 months or 36 months. That comes at a fee. But once the rights become available again, there's a few different ways to go, but you certainly could go back out to market with it. There could be a passionate executive that wanted it at one company, now is at another, and they're going to fight for it and champion it and feel like, it's something they're going to go to the mat for. You could re-engineer the creative and come up with a different take with different partners. Certainly did that a number of times on projects, and then reapproach the market and sell it again. There's various other ways to kind of not let a project wither on the vine, but keep sort of cracking at it if it feels like, everyone is still invested in seeing that adaptation, follow through.
When you were like first joined Gimlet, you just mentioned that Homecoming was already about to premiere. So I know you weren't there when that was first pitched or developed, but that show is often cited as like one of the most successful podcast adaptations to date. What did you learn from that experience? What are the qualities that made it translate from audio to screen so well? Were there learnings there that you tried to mimic across other campaigns or other IP that you were trying to develop?
Yeah, certainly. Sam Esmail coming to the table. A lot of that was thanks to CAA, and they packaged it up with Sam Esmail, with Julia Roberts. They made it an undeniable package. It was, I think, Julia's first TV project, and there was just something really exciting and sexy about the fact that it was based on a podcast, which no one had really seen before. It was certainly still at that time where a lot of film actors, prestige film actors, were doing TV for the very first time. And that created a lot of excitement. And so she is an example of, being able to really drum up that enthusiasm because it was her first one.
Beyond Homecoming, Gimlet had several other projects in development during your time there. Can you talk about some of those? Dolores Roach on Amazon Prime.
Dolores Roach, that was in a lot of ways something that I felt I contributed a lot to, as a just an advocate for the project. And we sold it to Blumhouse very early in my time at Gimlet. And then, it did take 5 years from that sale for the show to finally come out. And that was, a series that I was in Toronto producing on behalf of Gimlet and on behalf of Spotify for the pilot shoot, which was the summer of 2021, and then for the actual series shoot in the summer of 2022. But yeah, I mean, for the audience it reaches, it's got a great cult hit status. Yeah, I'm really proud of the show. It is a miracle it got on the air. It's about a cannibal, and it's funny and dark and emotional, and has some really horrific kind of body horror elements that I don't think have ever been on TV before. And for all of those reasons, I think it was, a huge creative success. Sometimes shows don't find, the audience they need to survive. Sometimes they need a little more time, and I think had the writer's strike not been going on, and had the actor strike not been going on, and had it not been a moment where the industry was sort of reassessing the bets it was taking, maybe we would have had a season two. I think it's very likely we would have had a season two, but that's why you need a bunch of projects.
Was Amazon Prime giving you like numbers or any kind of feedback as to how the show is performing? Or is it just a black box where you just say like they either want more or they don't want more?
We had a room for season two of the show. So they had invested in seeing through what the next season would look like. And, I think we figured out in the process of making Dolores what worked and what didn't. And so the scripts and the team on season two, the writer's room, really delivered on what we felt made the show special. And so it's a shame that we won't be able to get it made, but you move on to the next one. We don't get, direct feedback on performance. It was for the first few weeks in the top 10 on Prime. So it was number 2 for behind Jack Ryan, which had also just premiered. And, you could look at this as counter programming to that, pretty on pretty opposite ends of the spectrum. But, I think shows like Jack Ryan perform a lot better on Amazon than a show like Dolores Roach. So kudos to them for taking the chance on something as bold as Dolores. And yeah, very, very grateful to have had the chance to at least get one season of the show, knowing how challenging the material is.
I have to ask, what happened with Man of the People? Which, for anyone who doesn't know, is a Reply All episode that was optioned and it had Richard Linklater and Robert Downey Jr. attached. Are we ever going to see that?
No, I don't think so. In our imaginations, yes. Both of Linklater's most recent films I absolutely loved, but most things that you learn about are probably, the 10% of the things that are actually, happening between in packaging and sales of projects. And
Yeah, they want to build buzz, and hopefully that helps to get it made. It sounds a lot like Homecoming, like Julia Roberts, Sam Esmail, big names on both sides of the camera. So I get it. There's a zillion factors like timing, money, partnerships, etc. But that one I think was a really special piece that everybody was hoping to see.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that came together a bit before my time too. But I think it's just a testament to just how tough it is to get a project made and why it really is a miracle when you see anything on the air because of the number of hurdles that you have to go through to get a company to invest millions or tens of millions of dollars into a single idea. And so even when you have all of the creative element, even when you've done everything right and you've put together all of the pieces that make it as risky a proposition to a financier as possible still doesn't mean you're going to get the result you want. And that's just part of producing.
We've seen Spotify move on from Gimlet. We've seen Amazon move on from Wondery. A lot of these bigger institutions seem to have decided that they can make more money doing something else. Is it as simple as that, that they just think that there's like a better business model somewhere else? Or is there like some other problem or like ghost in the machine here?
A lot of it is that simple. You distill any business down to how much money what they're investing in returns for them. Like it that makes a ton of sense to me. I think the Hollywood bubble burst at the same time. I couldn't even quantify to you how much more challenging it is now than it was 5 years ago.
Well, it's also like the amount of access that people have to content now. I don't want to be that guy, but like I was just listening to an interview today about somebody making a movie with Sora, and they're like, things that would have cost $200 million now you can do on your cell phone. And I'm not advocating that. All of that has factored into a lot of the decision making that these bigger orgs are making.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't blame them for that. And I think, the changes that they've made to where their priorities are have probably benefited their stock prices and just to the overall kind of health of their businesses. So,
Which is important, but not everything. And that's the piece that we all live in the fringes of.
exactly right. Yeah.
Let's talk about the money side of things. How do podcasters actually make money from these deals? What does the payment structure look like? If I'm selling a podcast to a TV studio, like we don't have to talk about specific dollars, but what is a producer fee? What's an option fee? What is a development fee?
Yeah. So what you probably are going to see is an option fee that could range wildly from 5 grand to 100 grand, even higher.
If it's Robert Downey Jr., it's going to be higher.
Maybe, maybe not. I mean, again, just like with podcasts, budgets coming down, same thing in TV and film. And so I think, option fees are less than they used to be. But yeah, you're gonna see, an upfront payment of an option that gives, that financing party the exclusive right to develop the adaptation. And that basically gives them that exclusive right for 12 or 18 months. If you're lucky enough to get a green light, then you're going to see the purchase price kick in. And that can often be 7 to 10 times the amount of the option fee. And let's say you get through the first 12 months and they're not sure yet. They're like, we haven't found the right writer. We don't have the right, we still believe in this, but we need more time. They would then pay the option fee again. And the difference between those two option fees is that the first is applicable to the purchase price. So let's say it's a 10 grand option with $100,000 purchase price, they'd be paying 100,000 total. So, a 10 and then 90.
So you get 90 if they make it.
Right. And but if the second is additional, so you would be looking at 110. But typically the second option is not applicable to the purchase price. And then some deals will be bifurcated for the rights fee. And then the other element will be the actual producing services. That's a more complex fee structure, depends on who you're selling to. But if you are expecting to be an active participant on the adaptation, or rather if you're expected to be, an active participant on the adaptation, then you'll have basically two deals that are made, one for the rights of the podcast you own and then one for the producing services. And those deal structures can vary.
Do you have any cool stories?
I've got the whole array of stories. I teach a college course about the entertainment industry, and you'll have to enroll in that class if you want to hear some of the.
All right. So taking a step back, you have had this incredible journey through the entertainment industry, starting in the mailroom at WME and then to MGM, Sony Pictures, Illumination Entertainment. Can you walk us through that path and what drew you to the business of film and television?
I love stories. I think as a kid, it felt like a really alluring career path. You get to be creative. You get to have a lot of influence over culture. There is certainly the sense growing up, like, oh, I can have like a really lavish lifestyle, and I think that that probably draws a lot of people to the business.
Everyone saw Entourage.
Yeah, exactly. It all started with Entourage. Really, for me, it was like seeing big fantasy epics as kids, like X-Men and Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, but then seeing Noah Baumbach's like Squid and the Whale as like a teenager, and sort of seeing this whole other world of cinema that just felt like, the thing that, connected to me in a really personal way. My mom's a great storyteller. My grandfather was a great storyteller. And so I just have always loved listening to stories. And even as a kid, listening to audiobooks, I did a lot more than I did read, which sort of comes back around to my career later. I moved to LA with, the aspiration of wanting to be a producer, and having some sense of what that meant, learning a lot more after I got here. The creative element of being able to read scripts, give notes, collaborate with people who are more talented than me, that all felt like a really good fit for my interests. And then I like the process of putting things together, and being alongside others who are really, the visionaries. And so, yeah, it just was a great fit. I did what a lot of people do when they move to LA and want to work in entertainment. I went to a mailroom at a talent agency, and that gives you just a very introductory kind of grad school look at how the business actually works versus, how you see it portrayed on TV.
It's almost like a cliche at this point. I was a glorified assistant at the book publicity job that I had before Podglomerate, and I sat next to the accountant. It was just a coincidence. Sitting next to the accountant taught me 90% of what I know about the business today at Podglomerate, because, I just watched her pick up the phone and call people and ask why they hadn't paid their invoices. The things that you don't ever think about are really the pieces that will make a system run.
Yeah, and often those can be the most exciting and interesting elements of a project, like just the kind of strategic maneuvering, and often simply the alchemy of like a project coming together. You can't really predict or plan for, and sometimes the stars align.
We're almost out of time, but I do want to spend a minute talking about Sound Picture. Walk us through what you're doing, who you're working with, how that differs from Gimlet and Spotify.
Yeah, certainly. So Sound Picture, it's a production company. It's a TV and film production company. And I partner with podcasters, sometimes creators, sometimes music rights holders, and find opportunities in TV and film. I'm not a manager or an agent. I work really closely with rights holders, reps, but yeah, I am a producer proper, really being that advocate and steward of a project from start to finish, just like my time at Gimlet and Spotify, but now working with a wider array of rights holders, usually podcasters, and usually podcasters who are not embedded, whose work is not controlled by, a big conglomerate, or they're not embedded in a bigger company. So it's oftentimes independent podcasters who have a lot of interest in TV and film, and are just looking for someone who's going to put in the calls, who's going to stay active and driving a project forward really from start to finish. So finding the right creative elements, writers, directors, actors to package up the adaptations, and then work with their reps to sell the projects, pushing the project through development, on set, and through post and marketing, and all of the things that you sort of expect a producer to do. But rather than having a specific genre that I focus on, I have friends that focus on genre or rom-com. My focus is finding audio IP to adapt for TV and film. And that means projects span scripted and unscripted, features and TV, very similar to my time at Gimlet.
If someone is listening to this, are there boxes that they should check before they call you? What would those boxes say?
I am limited by what the marketplace is looking for right now. So I have a good sense of what that is, but I would just say, does it feel like an idea that has commercial resonance? And that's a good starting place. But I doors wide open. I truly listen to as many podcasts as I possibly can, to the detriment of, well, actually, to my Fitbit is grateful for all the steps I get while listening, but I love consuming podcasts and always eager to hear more.
And you all should take him up on that. Soundpicture.co. I'm sure he'd love to hear your ideas. I'll leave us with like an anecdote. We launched Missing Pages a few years ago, and which was a literary true crime, like serialized show. And we had intended on pitching this out for IP derivative stuff. And I got 3 or 4 emails from development agents that hit me up, and all of them wanted to talk about, like, how can we turn this into a TV show? And I went down that rabbit hole and soon learned I have a cool idea, but, like, I don't own the rights to any of the thing in the show. We're just reporting on the subjects that are in there. They don't need to work with me or do anything with us if they don't want to, because we don't have that kind of access. So I'll say as well, if you are going to be the person that's going to develop this into a project with Justin or otherwise, make sure that there's something there that kind of differentiates you from anybody else who could do it.
Yeah, I think the proprietary nature of whatever it is that's getting shopped is the most critical thing.
Well, thank you, Justin. Really, really appreciate your time. And I literally have 25 questions on my sheet here that I didn't get to ask you. So
Yeah,
we'll have to do this again soon.
let's do it again.
Thank you so much to Justin for joining us. You can find him online at LinkedIn or at soundpicture.co.
For more podcast-related news, info, and takes, you can follow me on LinkedIn at Jeff Umbro. Podcast Perspectives is a production of the Podglomerate. If you're looking for help producing, marketing, or monetizing your podcast, you can find us at podglomerate.com, shoot us an email at listen@thepodglomerate.com, or follow us on all socials at PodglomeratepOds. This episode was produced by Chris Boniello and myself, Jeff Umbro. This episode was edited and mixed by Jose Roman.
And thank you so much to the marketing team, Joni Deutsch, Madison Richards, Morgan Swift, Aaron Weiss, and Sheba Joseph.
And a special thank you to Dan Christo. Thank you all for listening, and I'll catch you all in a few weeks.